Hey,
Hey, happy early Thanksgiving.
yes, happy Thanksgiving early.
What are you grateful for?
I have to say, everything, 2024 has been a true blessing for me. And I was actually going through what I'm really grateful for. I have this meditation that I've been doing, which is a quick 20-minute walking meditation, which is every day, like three things that you're grateful for. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've accomplished a lot in 2024. So grateful for that. What about you?
I've been traveling with friends, so to see a lot of friends and family, and I'm just really grateful for being able to connect with people who mean so much to me and traveling safely, which is huge, and seeing my friends' kids who have turned out really, really well. And I'm hanging out with my little nephew, whose name is Kent, right now. So
Oh,
I'm
cool.
grateful that I'm not so crazy that they actually named him after me, which if I would not have gotten sober, and that ties into what we're talking about, they
Hmm.
never would have named him after me, that's for sure, because where I was 26 years ago was not someone to be modeled in any way, shape, or form. So I'm glad we're I'm just doing a little segue, but I'm glad we're doing this subject. But yes, there's a lot to be grateful for, and one of the main thing I'm always grateful for every day is that I'm sober and clean.
This is going to be a very interesting topic because I don't know much about addiction because I don't have what I consider addictions. I have like hyperfixations and then I get bored and move on, right? So, but I know people that have smoking addictions, sex addiction, like sexting and like, using social media for, I guess, pornography, I guess, that's a sex addiction as well. So, it's always interested me as far as like what happens, like how do you end up, like I can get the commonalities of smoking, especially if you come from the background in the 50s where everybody smoked. You had I Love Lucy, she smoked, Ricky smoked and all that stuff, but like how does this all come about? So I'm really happy to
Yeah,
dive into this.
yeah. Well, why don't we start with the definition? Yeah, it
Yeah.
just really grounds us and anchors us when we do that, I think. So, addiction is a mental or emotional dependence on a substance or activity characterized by intense craving and obsessive behavior, even in the face of consequences. So that, that's the thing, if we have a compulsive behavior, compulsive means we're doing it whether we want to do it or not. If we have a compulsive behavior, and that actually obsessive would be another word for it. Obsessive is thinking about something even if you don't want to think about it. I believe that compulsion is doing something even if you don't want to do it. So that's tied in with addiction. And so obsessing and compulsive behavior is would be fine if that if it worked. And it's the consequences that make us quit. Or at best, the consequences that would be to come, like smoking can kill me. I'm already coughing, but in my case, I'll just open this up with a bang. And I'm going to tell you that, first of all, we'll touch on 12-step programs. 12-step programs are anonymous. So, just for the record, I'm not saying that I am in or not have been, or maybe I have been, maybe I am not, maybe I am, it doesn't matter, but they're anonymous. So, I'm not outing whether I'm in or out of a 12-step program. So, that's there's a reason why people are anonymous in 12-step programs, because if, say, I was coming out and saying I'm clean and sober and look at me and this is how much better my life's gone, and I have gone to some sort of 12-step program, and then the next thing you know I'm doing a podcast where I'm drunk, and I started drinking again. Well, that wouldn't be very good press for that 12-step program, which is one of the main reasons why. Um, that's been the 12 steps have been around since I believe 1939 when they started with Alcoholics Anonymous, and it has been the thing that has helped people more than anything. So I think we're going to touch on that a lot. It used to be that people, because alcohol was the thing that people were most often addicted to, where there were consequences back in 1939. Now, there are a lot of things that people are addicted to, a lot of different kinds of drugs. But it used to be that they would say, hey, listen, your husband or wife is going to end up with wet brain. They're going to die. They're going to end up in a mental institution, or they'll just drink themselves to death. And the medical professionals would say there's not much we can do about it. But what ended up happening was these 12 steps came about, and we'll talk about that. And somehow people ended up getting sober, and people ended what now the statistics are still, I believe it was some Ivy League school, I can't remember which, that said you're now 60% more likely to stay sober. So twice plus likely to stay sober if you do a 12-step program. So I'm not um, I'm not advertising for 12 steps. I'm just saying that they seem to work the best, and we can talk about that. But with that definition, addiction is the mental or emotional dependence on a substance or activity characterized by an intense craving or obsessive behavior, even in the face of negative consequences. So it's the negative consequences that make us stop. So I said I was going to open this with a bang. Here's how I got. Where I was 26 years ago. I was I had been living on the street. I woke up shaking from withdrawals, sleeping on the Chicago streets, wondering how I got there. A nice gentleman came up to me with a 16-ounce beer that was half drunk, but he said, "It's still cold. Here, drink this if you want." And it was the nicest thing anybody could have ever done for me, was to give me a beer. So that's where I was 26 years ago. I was suicidal. I was hopeless, and something happened that allowed me to be sober, which we can talk about also. But um, it's a miracle that I am paying taxes and functioning, that I'm able to be a normal human being in this world, because I remember 26 years ago, my grandmother, who was alive at the time, said, "I'm afraid you're going to be locked up and declared incompetent. And I don't know if there's anything anybody can do for you." That's where I was. And I'm very far from that now. So if you want to talk about gratitude, I am extremely grateful for that. So um, the question is, I think in this episode that we're doing, is how does someone get from this mental or emotional dependence, meaning you need to do it, you have to do it, on a substance or any kind of activity, that you're dependent on it, and you have intense cravings or obsessive behavior, which means I'm doing this even though I don't want to do it. That's what addiction is. Even when we have horrible consequences, waking up on the street. I went to rehab several times. I went to jail. I was locked up in mental institutions. So I'm the real deal. How does someone, the question is, get from wanting to stop, wanting to quit, but not being able to being sober, and how do they stay sober and clean or free from whatever addiction it is? How do you get clean, sober, non-addictive, and how do you stay that way? And I think that's the big question, isn't it?
Well, actually, I want to go back a little bit. When you started your opening statement, you said addiction would have been okay if it would work, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
I I would like you to break that down because to me it means at some point you thought it would work and that's why you got into it.
Yeah. So we're getting something out of our addiction, right? An addiction is usually numbing ourselves from feeling a way we want to feel, we don't want to feel, right? So if it's, let's just go through the list of the different things people can be addicted to. Cigarettes, we do it to numb ourselves. We drink to numb ourselves. We smoke weed to numb ourselves, and use any kind of, whether it's cocaine or methamphetamine, you could just go down the list. We're doing
Mhm.
it so we can feel different from the way we feel. If we other kind of more benign addictions could be social media. It could be, but by all means watch us. Just kidding. I think that this is, but I'm kidding. But just looking compulsively on the internet, looking at our phones constantly. Those are more benign addictions, but they're real addictions. It can be obviously prescription drugs. It can be sex. It can
Mhm.
be, let's think about other things. It can be dependence on a human being. I'm addicted to this person. But we're doing, if it's
Mhm.
sex, we're doing that to numb ourselves. If it's a person, we don't want to be alone because we don't want to feel the feelings of what it's like to be me. We are plugging into something outside of ourselves. Even if we're addicted to, I mean, who's to say that we're really addicted to Netflix or whatever? But people say that. Anything that we are addicted to is to numb ourselves, I would say, from feeling the way we want to feel, to distract ourselves or to numb ourselves. So that's what we're getting out of it. If I was to simplify it, I would believe.
So I never even realized codependency could be one. Now that you put that into perspective, then that would be my addiction. I was always codependent, until just recently. So, damn, who would have thought? I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congratulations. You're addicted too. I think the human mind gets addicted. And so the question is why? I mean, if anybody wants to put in a chat and share the reasons why they think that they are, but my experience with my own addiction and what I've observed for being around quite a lot of other people who were addicted for the last 2.5 decades is that it's to distract or numb ourselves from feeling the way we feel. So it's to get rid of suffering, and that's the reason why. To answer your question, in my opinion.
I think that's fair. Um, on top of other things that we've also, you know, add on to it, which is part of that fear or lack of, you know, being or feeling invalidated, dismissed, and like you said, just trying to be someone different. I think it's probably. I think that just hit everything. Like everything underneath it is going to be just to feel different from what I'm feeling now. Whether it's fear, whether it's lack, whether whatever. That's the thing. I don't want to feel this anymore.
So
Done.
those are the reasons why we feel ways that cause suffering, cause emotional pain, but it's the emotional pain we're trying to get rid of. So that's the
Mhm.
reason. So here's the cliche. This is an old country saying, but you get a drunk horse thief. You get a drunk horse thief, and you sober him up. What do you have? You have a sober horse thief,
Mhm.
meaning you have somebody who needs to drink, who needs to be dependent on someone, who needs to have sex to feel better, who needs to numb themselves with weed or whatever it is. They need that. You take that addiction away, and all you are is someone who needs that addiction. So we have to treat the symptom, which is the beautiful, beautiful question you asked. We have to treat the symptom, which is that need to numb ourselves. And the question is, how do we do that? And that's the work. That's why we need recovery programs. That's why we need therapists, coaches, friends, support groups. we need people who understand us. So that would be the first thing that I would say is that we have to have a program to get over it. And how do we do that?
Let me ask you if you don't mind, since you opened up with a bang. So 26 years ago, you were in that, mentality. How long were you experiencing that addiction, and the symptoms of it prior to 26 years ago, saying, I need to do something different? How many years were you in there?
Yeah, I drank. So now you can pretty much guess how old I am, but so so now I started as drinking as a teenager and drank for 10 years, and but it was alcoholic. Now, um, when I first drank, I when I first drank, I thought to myself, "Oh my God, this is amazing." I was an athlete. I said I wouldn't drink, and when I did, I was like, "This is such an amazing feeling, and I want to do this every day as often as I can." Now, I got beat up that night because I was flirting with an older girl who had a boyfriend, and he didn't like it, and I ended up down in the sand, and after I'd gotten beaten up, and I couldn't wait to do it again. So, think about that definition: obsessive behavior, even when faced with negative consequences. So, I had negative consequences, but the reason I did it is I felt numb and I felt elated. This feeling of elation was something that I didn't know existed, and it made me feel better. So that was a sign that I was an addict right off the bat, because I was affected so deeply and I couldn't wait to keep doing it again. So that's the insanity of an addiction.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Because you hadn't felt joy before in that sense.
No,
Okay. I totally got. Wow. Okay. So then for your case, and the issue stemmed further down, childhood trauma or whatever, which led up to that
or
point.
maybe genetics too.
Mm.
They've done studies with rats. I think as important as they took, and I'm talking about alcohol right now, but just insert whatever addiction you'd like. And they had water with alcohol in that water, and 1 in 10 or 1 in 9 or something like that of the rats would go straight to the water with the alcohol diluted in water, and would drink that until they died. They just kept going back to it. So there was a predisposition. So if you have an addiction, know that there's a good possibility that trauma, like Nada said, as well as genetic predisposition, can play in there. So there are even personality traits that people can often have that you're usually, well, you can say born with, or you that have been conditioned into you, that certain people have, that line up with addiction. And I won't go into all those. The point is that this is something that you didn't create because you're a screw up. You have this addiction because it's something in you. And if you look at the definition of what we said, it's bigger than you are. The addiction is bigger than you are. That's what makes it an addiction, because we want to stop at times. We want to stop, but we can't at times. That's what's pathetic about it. It's sad. And when I say pathetic, I don't mean in a condescending way. It's a way you should have compassion for yourself. But I think that a place to really start with this is to say, how does someone who is completely addicted get out of their
Mhm.
addiction? And that's a question.
Yeah. And I was going to actually say that because they always have that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And so, as you're telling your story, I would think that the person has to fall to their deepest level,
Hmm.
and then they have a choice to make at that moment. Either one route, they don't clean up or whatever, and it may lead to death. And then the other would be like, okay, I really need to put an effort into this recovery, this rehabilitation, or what have you. But Does it come down to that point where somebody would just, or is that the norm that they just fall into one of the deepest moments and darkest moments of their lives and they have to make that decision? Or does it work like I've seen, remember that show? I think it was an MTV where they had celebrity rehabs or whatever. They kept going and going and going and they just kept going because they just weren't ready for the
Right.
rehab. You know, they went there like 5, 10 times. Like at what point does it make sense for you to accept the help?
Well, I think you answered the question in your question, and I think that it's not always the case, but they call it hitting rock bottom, which is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have these the payoff of what we're getting from our addiction, which is we're numbing ourselves. I mean, that's really what we're saying. We're numbing ourselves and we're feeling different from we're not having to feel the emotional pain of what it feels like to be human. And that could be caused from trauma, it could be caused from, you can just do the whole list of why. But it's numbing our pain. So we're getting something from our addiction. Let's use the example of every time I feel stressed, I light a cigarette. Every time I feel stressed, I light a cigarette. Well, for that person who's addicted to cigarettes, it could be emphysema, it could be getting pneumonia, it could be getting cancer. That could be with me with my alcohol addiction. I was getting a lot out of things, and I still had so this is to answer your question. I hit rock bottom. I had wrecked a car in a blackout. I had, woken up on the street not knowing how I got there. But there is something when we hit rock bottom. It's not anything on the outside, but it's a place that brings us, and this is my experience is it brings us to a place of surrender. It brings us to a place of, I can't do this anymore. And either that person is able to muster up enough willpower or they just give up to the point where something happens that's
Mm-hmm.
mysterious. So all I can tell you is me doing the best I could was to drink alcoholically. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. I used to pray to a higher power on the way to the liquor store, saying, "Please help me not drink. Please help me not drink. Just give me a 6 pack of whatever and a pint of Jack Daniels. Please help me not drink." And I would end up drunk. So I tried everything. I actually even tried to get on something called Antabuse, which is this old school stuff that you drink. It is supposed to make you throw up. I drank on that. So me doing the best I could, and by the way, I didn't throw up. I just got really high blood pressure and turned red. It was insane. So the first step of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and again, I want to say that I'm not saying that I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I want to say that I want to relate this to people who, because it's an anonymous program, but I want to relate this to people who may or may not be thinking about going to a treatment center that offers the 12 steps or going to a 12-step meeting. We hit that rock bottom and we realize the first step is I am powerless over whatever my addiction is. I'm powerless over alcohol in my case, and my life has become unmanageable. So I hit the point. One day I woke up, I didn't know how I got where I got. It wasn't different from other situations on the outside because I told you I'd wrecked cars in blackouts. I'd ended up, on the street. I had been in homeless shelters. I'd been in mental institutions, but something inside of me broke. And it's like, I'm screwed. And basically I'm powerless over my addiction. And my life is unmanageable, meaning that it can't be managed by me. I can't manage it. So
Mm-hmm.
what happened to me was one moment I was a drunk who had to drink, and the next day I was sober, and the next moment I was sober. One day I was drunk, and the next day I was sober. One moment I had to drink, and the desire left me. So that's what is called surrender. It's mysterious. It's not always that way. Somebody can hit somebody can hit a rock bottom in a place, and maybe they can muster up enough willpower. For someone like me who had a very strong addiction, my will had been horribly weakened. That is why we can't judge someone who has an addiction like that. But what happened was this surrender happened, and that is the first step. I'm powerless over my addiction. My life is unmanageable, and something happened to take that away. And then what I was left with was me, and that's what needed to be treated.
So when you said that surrender, that was kind of mysterious. Did you mean you just quit cold turkey, or was that your experience, or was it multiple attempts?
Well, there were multiple attempts for over 5 years'
Hmm.
time of trying to get sober, and I couldn't because I was getting a lot of consequences with my drinking. Right off the bat, when I was in high school, I was getting arrested. So I had consequences right away, but those consequences, there was a payoff that I was still getting, and it caused me to be addicted, which my definition of addiction is wanting to quit but not being able to stop. And there was one time when you could say I quit cold turkey, but I wouldn't say that I quit. I think that what happened was one moment I had to drink, and there was a surrender, a giving up that happened, and that desire was taken from me. Um, it could be that one wakes up. I'll use examples. One wakes up and their children aren't speaking to them, and their wife is about to leave them, and it's like there's a moment of clarity, like I can't do this anymore.
Hmm.
Or there's uh, this person who I'm dependent on, to use codependency, this person is never going to do exactly what I want them to do that's going to make me feel okay. And then what we're left with is ourselves. And we're left with either a choice, which is like I have to muster enough willpower, or in my case, my willpower had been so weakened that what it took was a surrender and a giving up. And so that is why people bring up spirituality. Because in my case, if I'm to, let's just say, forget about anything anybody teaches, anything anybody learns about in a temple or a church or a mosque, forget about any new age spiritual teachings. All I know is one day I had to drink, the next day I didn't have to anymore. And there was something bigger than me that took that away, is the only thing I can describe. So, hence, something like the 12 steps or something like other methods, there is a desire to have a relationship with a power greater than yourself. Um, that seems to be what works very, very well for a lot of people. Not
Hmm.
everybody, but I'm just saying that that's my experience. And so for me, that was my first step. If I was to make a parallel of the 12 steps, was that I was powerless. And then the next step of the 12 steps is, um and this is the last time I'm going to say this. I'm not saying I'm in a 12-step program, but this next step is, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. So I was insane. I was
Hmm.
drinking, even though I had all these consequences. And so that power that got me sober when I surrendered enough was the power that I needed to depend on to help me to live in a way that I could live and function in the way that I was functioning, because what I was drinking over was me. I was trying not to feel me. So me getting sober, I was just like that analogy I use. You get a drunk horse thief, you sober him up. What do you have? Is you have a sober horse thief. Well, I was left the guy that needed to drink, and the desire to drink had been taken away. So I was depressed. I was anxious. I was angry. So what do I do now? Well, I have to treat that addiction. And that takes a lot of support. For me, spirituality, and it also took, which is very practical, a lot of altruistic actions. And in other words, me becoming the kind of person that felt better about myself, and a lot of connections with other people who understood me. And it took meditation. It took a lot of things that, just for all intents and purposes, they're mapped out very simply in 12 steps on what to do.
So I'm gonna say, just for anyone who is maybe thinking about going through it, it was not an easy journey. Just to put it out there, that's not an easy journey to go through this process. If you are without that substance, whatever that is, you start feeling all these emotions. You kind of start purging these, your emotions, your you, like in the definition, you have this obsessiveness and this harsh craving for this thing. But in your case, one day you didn't, the other day one day you did, the other day you didn't. But the recovery to this was a long process.
Thank you for saying that. It's so true. And that's it. And by the way, people's cravings can come back.
Mhm.
Um, but so why does recovery work, and what is recovery? Well, there are a lot of things that are common with recovery, and this is a long process. It's a long process of getting better. The problem is when we have some sort of addiction, it takes care of it like that. But the problem is that there are enough consequences that cause us to know that we can't do this anymore, that we can't live like this anymore. So whether it's a surrender and we give up, or you could say that somehow we muster up some willpower, which I didn't have, but some people can have. Um, the question is, what do we do to replace that need for whatever our substance or activity is that we're
Mhm.
addicted to? And what do we do to be someone who doesn't need to use that substance or do that activity? And that process, to your point, is a long process. Unlike if we're addicted to sex or porn, we feel better for the time being, but then we're still left with ourselves. But we keep doing it, and whatever that is, and we keep going back to it because at least that numbs us out. But the reason it ultimately doesn't work is, number one, there are consequences with relationships and whatever happens to our environment, because what we're doing usually isn't healthy. And that's the first reason. The other reason is that it doesn't ultimately work. We're dependent on that person, place, thing, situation, activity to make us feel better. But the beautiful thing about recovery is we get to learn to be okay no matter what. So we don't need something on the outside to make us okay.
Mhm.
So what I can tell you is the best thing that could have ever happened to me was to be someone who needed a drink, and to have become addicted, and to have run myself into the ground with it, so that I was forced to have to do this work to live in a way where I think I can be a positive force in this world rather than a negative force. I certainly wouldn't be here talking to you all about any subjects if it hadn't been for this recovery. So, what seems to be the worst thing that could ever happen to us sometimes can be our greatest gift, but we don't see that until we've done a good amount of work. Yeah, and gotten through it.
So I think one, I'm making an assumption, not that I know if this is a majority of the case, but I would imagine that people are afraid of doing this alone, because by the time they're at this point, they've lost relationships with everything. They probably lost their jobs. Friends don't want to hang out with them. Family forget about it. And is this process that you go through a solo process, other than meeting people there, or?
So, here's the interesting thing, to use the 12 steps. The first step is we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and our lives had become unmanageable. The first word of the first step is we.
Mhm.
So I think that's very interesting. So it's saying that you are doing something with a group of people. So who is that group of people? Any kind of recovery model has, let me back up and talk about how Alcoholics Anonymous started. There was a stockbroker who had sort of come up with this idea of how to stay sober. He had a spiritual experience when he was lying in a hospital bed. He said, God, if you're here, I don't know if I believe in you or not, or something along those lines, but just show yourself to me. He had this white light experience,
Mhm.
and his desire to drink left him. Very, very similar to what happened to me. And he wanted to know what this power was that got him sober, and started to come up with something based on Christianity in his case, but it's I'm sure in all spiritual traditions that was similar at that point to the 12 steps. Not quite, but at that point it had some similarities. But he had the idea that he needed to admit some things to other people and that he needed to help other people. So he had been sober for a length of time, I think months, and he was a horrible drunk before. He lived in New York and in New York City, and was in Akron, Ohio for a business, for some sort of business deal. He's a stockbroker, and he had the desire to drink, and the desire to drink was really starting to take him over. So he realized that what he needed to do, based on what he had learned, is that he needed to help someone else to be able to help himself.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so the way Alcoholics Anonymous started, which is what all 12-step programs are based on, is one person with that addiction talking to another. So he got on a payphone and got in the town directory. It was a small town at that time. And they said, yes, there's a doctor in town. He was a proctologist, actually. And they said, um, if you want to talk to this guy, he's helpless and hopeless, but if you want to talk to him, feel free to. And his wife said, look, you can't help him. Everybody's tried to help him. He was shaking, going through withdrawals, and he said, I'd like to talk to him. He goes in to the doctor, and the doctor said, look, you can't help me. People have tried to help me. Please don't waste your time. And what Bill Wilson, that stockbroker, said to him was, you don't understand. I'm helping you so that I can help myself. That's why I'm here. And he just told his story. And see if you can tell I'm getting emotional because it works. He told his story, and he, in that telling of his story, I can tell you that Dr. Bob, who was the guy he helped, never had a drink again, nor did the stockbroker Bill Wilson. And it was that initial understanding of each other and feeling like you're not alone. And then they went and helped another gentleman, and then they started getting, helping other people, and the medical professionals in the hospitals couldn't believe it. They said, I don't understand why these people are helping, but they're getting out of their beds and they're getting sober. So that's how it all started, is one person with the addiction talking to another. So to answer your question, whether it's support groups, whether it's friends, whatever it is, it's a age old thing that has worked for, well, it's worked for over 8 decades. So
Wow. That was, I got it a little bit teary-eyed too. That's that's amazing. Okay. So let's continue on with this progress then. So you basically get what's now called a sponsor, right? The person that you can call up.
yeah. I get emotional because it's the reason I'm emotional is because it, it, grace is is undeserved. It comes to you. It's an undeserved gift that comes to you, and it's humbling to know. I didn't know I was going to get emotional, but um, really, really talking about this and knowing that there are these two guys that met each other, and they allowed us to be alive. And you can say, well, that sounds like a cult or whatever. Well, it's a cult that works if it's a cult. All I know is it's people helping people for no amount of money at all. It's always free. And it's a beautiful thing. So, yes, you have a sponsor. And when a sponsor, the first thing they do is they take you through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, that's how it works. So tell me where you would like to go. Tell me from your perspective, what questions you have about it, what you want to know, and I can answer them. So I'll let you take the lead.
So I think I've never really understood what the 12 steps were, um, the actual process of it. And and I'm assuming I know that there's a serenity prayer involved. Um, and why is it? It would seem like 12 steps is pretty simple to achieve. It's short term. It's not like, it's not like a full year, 365-year program or anything like that. It's just short. It's a short 12 steps. So, as a person who's might be thinking about doing this, what can they expect out of this program?
Yeah. So what you do is you find a higher power. I'm going to give you the short answer first. You find a higher power, and you learn to trust that higher power. And then you find out more about yourself, and you get out of the way the things that are getting in the way by seeing your behaviors that caused yourself to be someone who needed to indulge in your addiction. And then you help others and continue to have a relationship with that higher power. That's the answer. Um, I mean, I could go through, I know them by heart. I could go through and tell you every step, but I don't know if that's going to be very helpful. But y- the first three steps is, you're powerless over your addiction, your life's unmanageable. And two is you come to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity. And three, you make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of that higher power. All that is to say, is to sum it up, is I trust that there could be some higher power I could have a relationship with. And then what you do with your fourth step is you look at all the people who piss you off and all the situations and principles and everything that piss you off. And then you look at what it affects. Did it affect your pocketbook, your ambition? Did it affect how you see others, how you see yourself? Does it affect your relationship with other people? What does it affect? Like, how did it hit you? How did it affect you? And then after, well, you're going to say why. Actually, before that, you talk about why these people, situations, whatever it is, hurt you, how they hurt you, and what you're pissed off about. And then you look at the part you play in it,
Mhm.
and it's like, how did I cause this? So when I first started going through this, I thought that I was a victim of life. And then I realized, oh my God, I did all of these things that I did. So it starts to shift your perception. And when you start to see, for instance, I was mad at this person who messed me over in high school. um, I'm just telling you a real story. Um, if he's listening, he'll know who he is. We're very good friends. I just spent some time with him a couple days ago, but I'm just using something in high school that happened, so it's not something that's really deep and dark. But he had done some things that really upset me. Let's just say that, and I felt like he betrayed me as a friend. Well, the reason he did, and it affected my relationship with my girlfriend. It affected the way I feel about myself, the way I look to other people. But what did I do? Well, I actually made a move on his girlfriend in high school, and then I told him about it. Well, see, the thing is we don't see. It seems like a silly example because we're in high school, but we don't see the things that we do. So what we do is the next step after that is we talk to someone else about it, and we talk about all of our faults and our wrongdoings. And it says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact natures of our wrongs. And then we become willing to ask our higher power to relieve ourselves of those shortcomings, and then we ask Him to let them go, and then what we do is we make amends. So we try to make right any of the wrongs we've done. So it's very much of a program of action. So you make a list of all the people you've harmed that you see in that first inventory that I mentioned that you did, which is the 4 step, and it's like, oh wow, I've got to make amends to all these people. So I'm going to go to this guy from high school and be like, look, man, I did all these things to you. What can I do to make it right? Is there anything I can do? And there's some people we owe money to, or some people we need to make a living amends, which we need to act in a way that's different. And so what happens is we become in that process a different person. So what does that mean? That means we're more comfortable in our own skin. We have more self-esteem. We feel better about ourselves. We have better relationships with other people. And in the process, we're in a support group and we're no longer lonely. We feel connected to other people and we have purpose. So that connection that you get from going through the steps that you have with a higher power, which helps you to trust life, that connection you have with other people is something that starts to replace the need for our addiction, and that self-esteem that we feel from being the right kind of person and the benefits we get from our relationships that are have depth, not just our self-esteem but the depth of relationships. So we've done those first 9 steps which are the crux of the 12 steps, and 10, 11, and 12 are maintenance steps. We in step 10, you sought through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God. I mean, no, I'm sorry. Step 10 is you continue to take inventory, and when you're wrong, you promptly admit it. So it's
Mhm.
basically you just keep doing those inventories about, oh, okay, I'm mad at this person. Okay, where do I need to make things right? And you just continue to do it. And then you, through prayer and meditation, you improve your conscious contact with God. And step 12, step 12 is to to help people, to do what that stockbroker did with the doctor. You Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics or to whoever has this addiction, whatever it is, other codependents or whatever it is, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So that's the 12 steps in a nutshell. And the reason I can just say it is because I've lived it,
Mhm.
and we live it because you when you come in, you may not want to, but you find out it's the best deal around because you get to live a life that has the freedom that you were searching for in your addiction.
So how long did this transformation go for you?
20
How long was it?
26 years.
Oh, so
Because
it
I'm
was
right.
the whole,
Well,
well,
I'm
well, you're
saying
still maintaining now. Now you're giving back and all that stuff. But the 12 steps, let's say when you reach 12 step, did they give you chips or am I confusing it with another program?
you do chips for lengths of time that you're sober. From what I've
Okay.
heard in programs, not saying I've done it. Obviously, I've worked the 12 steps, so it doesn't mean I'm part of a 12-step organization. So I'm just saying that caveat. So, yes, that was a cutesy answer, but it was also a sincere answer that is taken because we're always a work in progress.
Right.
I'll tell you that I had a moment when at the time I was selling insurance and I was talking about that you get a free ambulance ride, air ambulance ride, and I said, actually, when I was with this insurance, you get a free air ambulance ride, and actually, when I was 13 years old, I I was air ambulance somewhere. Because I was dying when I was that age, and I had this horrible infection that was in my hip and it was spreading all over my body, and it saved my life to have that um, to have that surgery that I was air ambulance. So I was telling that story, and I realized something hit me for the first time, and it's when I just worked the steps that I used to wake up every morning and think, "Oh no, not another day."
Mhm.
And this time, for at this moment, I realized that I was glad I was alive. And it's hard for me not to get emotional because I haven't gotten emotional in other podcasts, but I realized that I was happy I was alive, and I had to go into the bathroom. I'd never asked to use someone's bathroom, but I had to go in there and cry, because I felt so grateful that I was I was alive. So that was a moment. I mean, there were a lot of moments where I realized I had changed, and you really do have a psychic change, and that's what it talks about in the 12 steps. And I did. I became a different person. People could tell I
Mhm.
was different. I when I first got sober when I was young, I I found out I heard people used to call me Crazy Kent. And I didn't know, because you don't call a crazy person crazy to their face is probably not a good idea. But you know, people don't really call me crazy anymore. You know, I'm a different person, and I became very different.
And I would like to add that you're different without medication. And that is huge in a world where pharmaceutical tries to push stuff onto you. I mean, that's just talks about what this higher power is, right? That you're able to do this without the assistance of medication. It was all you that did it. So,
Yeah. Well, and what I do want to say is, you know, I don't know. I mean, some people need to be on medication, some people don't. But all I can tell you is, regardless, there is. Thank you for saying that. Is it is humbling, and the emotion that you've seen is gratitude, and it's humility, because I don't mean humility and, oh, look at me, I'm humble. It's a crushing humility to know that I didn't do it. I didn't get myself sober. I don't keep myself sober. Yes, I worked my butt off,
mhm.
but there is a power greater than myself that has come into my life, and that I get to have a relationship with, and I get to have relationships with other people in ways that deepen and enhance my life in ways that I didn't know were possible. So if you are addicted to something and you're thinking about going through a recovery journey, you may very well be like me and look back and know that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to you, but you're not going to feel that way now. If you're at the beginning of it, you won't feel that way. But just to quote Aerosmith, as they said in in the song "Amazing," it's amazing. In a blink of an eye, you finally see the light. It's amazing. When the moment arrives, you know you'll be all right. It's amazing, and I'm saying a prayer for the desperate hearts tonight. And that song really hits me, because there was a moment where I realized I couldn't continue the way I was continuing, and that's when a whole new life can open up.
Wow, this has been a very deep topic. And I really am grateful that you opened up so much. You really just, put yourself, your vulnerability out there. The emotions came through, and I know this is hard. It's hard for you to remember, but also very rewarding to see where you're at now. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these. I mean, I can't talk about recovery from addiction without being open, or or I wouldn't talk about it, because the recovery, the thing that you're witnessing is just, I mentioned gratitude, but you're also witnessing that you can't bullshit gratitude. You can't bullshit that, you know, that you have a relationship with something greater than yourself. Because let's face it, addiction is greater than you are. Addiction is greater than you are. It's bigger, because I'm going to go back to that definition that came up when I looked up addiction. Addiction is a mental or emotional dependence, needing, we have to do it, on a substance or activity that is characterized by intense cravings. Cravings is something that is inside of you. It's like an itch you need to scratch. It's like if you have poison ivy and you have to scratch it. And an obsessive behavior, obsession, meaning I don't want to think about this, but I'm thinking about it. I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it, even faced with negative consequences. So, what that means is that it's bigger than we are. So, we have to find something that's bigger. And that big higher power could be a group, or it could be something spiritual, or it could be both. And I can't say enough that I, as the saying says, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, meaning that there are so many people who have helped me out of the goodness of their heart. And I just owe so much back, and I do the best I can to give back. And that's how this works. But if you haven't had the privilege of being able to get out of yourself and help someone else, even if you're not addicted, um, people in addiction do it because they sort of have to, but it's the biggest gift. And I think you can sense, I'm not saying, hey, look at me, I'm great. No, I did it because I had to, but it's the biggest gift. It's the most beautiful thing that someone can do for another human being, to
I
be
mean,
there for someone else.
it comes back to you. Everything, every time you give back, it comes back to you tenfold,
Well, that's
and it's a
what you're
beautiful
doing with your podcast. That's what you're doing with
thing.
your work.
Well, with that, what would you like to end it with? What is the one moral of the story to close this up?
Your addiction is bigger than you, so you need help outside of yourself. You can't do it alone. If I was in a ditch and I was dying and that was the last thing I could say to an addict, that's what I would say. You can't do it alone. That's the bottom line. And also, if I was to add one more thing to that, if I had one more thing I could say, it would be that there is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of, even though you may feel like there are things that you've done that are shameful. When you meet a group of other people, you'll see there's nothing specially horrible about what you've done, that you're just like all the other people. And just know that when you're addicted, you haven't chosen to be this way. It's because something's gotten a hold of you, and it doesn't mean that you're not responsible for your own actions, but you haven't hit that bottom yet that has made you, if you haven't hit that bottom, you haven't hit that bottom. But the time comes when the time comes when you can give up and you can choose a new way of life. So don't be hard on yourself, but just reach out for help, and um, get online, and there's just help everywhere. So it's there.
Yeah. And Kent, that's what you do. You're a life coach. You help people in depression, addiction. What else? What other topics do you help with?
Life's purpose, addiction. I help people with a lot of people who want to end their life. That's just a temporary thing you're going through. A lot of people who are having depression, hard times in their life, people who have reached a lot of success in their life and they've hit the bottom in some way, shape, or form of now what? This isn't working. So, any kind of bottom somebody's hit, I'm here to help them. And um, I don't apologize for helping with spiritual matters or helping people spiritually, but the thing that I'll say is it's completely practical. If
Mhm.
this is anything that is spiritual, is extremely practical. So that's what I help people with. Tell everyone what you help people with, Nada,
So
please.
what I do is I bring people together like yourself to help others. So people that have different types of services that are holistic and different. They're not in the pharmaceutical program. So it could be on like sweat lodges, moon ceremonies, other types of journeys. So I bring those people that know about those methods, and they can get in contact to just provide alternate methods of assistance, so just additional resources. So I basically broker people. I'm like, if you need help, try this. Why not? This may help you move your journey along a little bit faster than a traditional seeing your therapist once a week or every 2 weeks and all that stuff.
How can people get in touch with you?
I am at Guided Counsel, COUNSEL. So I have my own channel, my own YouTube. It's separate. It's more esoteric, metaphysical, but it's just a different perspective on how to achieve different achieve different milestones in your life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And you can get in touch with me at KENTSCHEIBEL.com, kentscheibel.com. So Right on. So we just hit the hour mark. So perfect ending, perfect
Yeah.
time to end. So
Yes. Thank you. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for sharing. Like, I think this is the first time that we've had an Instagram live where I was kind of speechless. Normally I have a lot to say, but I was really moved by what you said. And I really appreciate it. It was very, very heartfelt. I really felt it. Thank you so much.
thank you, Nada. Much love to everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.